Do you know about Hofstede Cultural Dimensions? Now let's talk about it more deeper. Hofstede Cultural Dimensions is a framework for cross-cultural communication, developed by Geert Hofstede. It shows the effects of a society's culture on the values of its members, and how these values relate to behavior, using a structure derived from factor analysis. So we will talk about how Hofstede Cultural Dimensions in USA.
The first dimensions we talk about is indulgence versus restraint. One of the challenges that humanity faces at all time, and how the human being face it is depending on how they are raised. This dimension is defined as the extent to which people try to control their desires and impulses. As the tendency of the weak control over their impulses is called indulgence, and a strong control over their urges is called restraint. Cultures can also be described as indulgent or restrained. The score of the United States as an indulgent society is 68 on the sixth dimension. This, a combination with the normative score, is reflected by the contradictory, which is attitudes and behavior said. Work hard and play hard, with the meaning of working hard and also playing as hard. This term can be defined as an indulgence after the restraint. The United States has waged a war against drugs and is still doing so until now, yet drug addiction in the States is comparably higher than in many other wealthy countries. We can take weed as an example. While some of the states in U.S. legalize weed, most of them still don't. Even with most percentage of the states in the U.S. still doesn't legalize weed, the addiction is still high, which show that the United States is more of an indulgent country.
Next dimensions we have individualism versus collectivism. Individualism is the one side versus its opposite, collectivism, that is the degree to which individuals are integrated into groups. The fundamental issue addressed by this dimension is the degree of interdependence a society maintains among its members. It has to do with whether people's self-image is defined in terms of I or we. In individualist societies, people are only supposed to look after themselves and their direct family. In collectivist societies, people belong to in groups that take care of them in exchange for unquestioning loyalty. Based on Hofstede's insight, United States can clearly been seen as individualistic, scoring a 91. The American premise of liberty and justice for all is clearly a representation of this. This is the Americans' hope for a better quality of life and a higher standard of living than their parents. This belief is that anyone, regardless of their status, is loosely knit, in which the expectation is that people look after themselves and their immediate families only and should not rely too much on authorities for support.
Next we have long-term orientation versus short-term orientation. Long-term orientation is when you are focused on the future. You are willing to delay short-term material or social success or even short-term emotional gratification in order to prepare for the future. And for short-term orientation is when you are focused on the present or past and consider them more important than the future. Americans are prone to analyze new information to check whether it is true. Thus, the culture doesn't make most Americans pragmatic, but this should not be confused with the fact that Americans are very practical, being reflected by the can-do mentality mentioned above. The polarization mentioned above is, so to speak, strengthened by the fact that many Americans have very strong ideas about what is good and evil. This may concern issues such as abortion, use of drugs, euthanasia, weapons, or the size and rights of the government versus the states and versus citizens. The US is one of the only Caucasian countries in the world where, since the beginning of the 20th century, visiting church has increased. This increase is also evident in some post-Soviet republics such as Russia. American businesses measure their performance on a short-term basis, with profit and loss statements being issued on a quarterly basis. This also drives individuals to strive for quick results within the workplace.
Now we talk about masculinity versus femininity. The masculinity side of this dimension represents a preference in society for achievement, heroism, assertiveness, and material rewards for success. Society at large is more competitive. Its opposite, femininity, stands for a preference for cooperation, modesty, caring for the weak and quality of life. Society at large is more consensus-oriented. On that scale, America measures as being a culture that ranks fairly high on the masculinity level. Americans are very much goal-driven and deal-focused. They also feel strong about independence, individual decision-making, decisiveness and being tough.
Next we talk about power distance. Power distance is a measure of the members assembling unevenly. It reflects the values of the members who live in society or those who have more power. Power distance is a culture in which some people are superior to others because of social status, gender, race, age, education, birth, background and other factors. Power distance is classified into two parts, namely high power distance and low power distance. Based on Hofstede's insight, the United States clearly shows that power distance with a score of 40 is included in low power distance. Americans have the same rights within themselves. At work, an American may express the ideas he has in the decision-making process. They usually solve problems using their own strategies, so resolve conflicts openly and directly.
Last dimensions we will talk about uncertainty avoidance. The uncertainty avoidance dimension relates to the degree to which individuals of a specific society are comfortable with uncertainty and the unknown. Countries displaying strong uncertainty avoidance index believe and behave in a strict manner. Individuals belonging to those countries also avoid unconventional ways of thinking and behaving. Weak UI societies display more ease in regards to their behavior more than if the culture would have either scored higher or lower. Thus, this cultural pattern reflects itself as follows. There is a fair degree of acceptance for new ideas, innovative products and a willingness to try something new or different, whether it pertains to technology, business practices or food. Americans tend to be more tolerant of ideas or opinions from anyone and allow the freedom of expression. At the same time, Americans do not require a lot of rules and are less emotionally expressive than higher scoring cultures. At the same time, 9/11 has created a lot of fear in the American society, culminating in the efforts of government to monitor everybody through the NSA and other security organizations. In conclusion, that actually every country has different status for each dimensions. That's why every country has their speciality itself. We already in the end of this discussion video. Thanks for watching.